Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
A Geek for Fun.
And Steve.
Today we're doing something that we never thought we'd do here on Geeky Gentlemen. We're talking about a Batman comic by this Tom King guy. I never heard of him before. I bet he's real popular on the internet, though.
Yeah, you know, I'm sure there's nothing unsavory in his past that people would latch on to for no reason.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So anyway, what's this story, Steve?
All right, so today we are talking about Batman, One Bad Day, The Riddler, Deadly Reigns, #1. That's a mouthful of a title, but that's literally what it's called. Or Dreadful Reigns. Sorry, I keep fucking up the riddle.
And it's kind of a lot.
It's a lot. For people who do not know, which because they're living under a rock or they don't read comics or both, One Bad Day is a series of one-shot prestige format OGNs, or OGN close to OGNs really, that were going to be released over the course of a year. So we opened with the Riddler, and since then we've gotten Penguin, Bane, Catwoman, Mr. Freeze, we got a Ra's al Ghul one coming out, a Clayface one is coming out. But basically the premise behind this is the Killing Joke originally was a 64-page prestige one-shot, and it has that really famous line of Joker trying to prove that anyone can go crazy after one bad day, even though that's not the point of the story really by the end. And people who make these books have talked about that before were like, it was entirely a marketing thing to just call it One Bad Day. No one really paid attention to the Killing Joke for that. But they basically aped that format, gave it the same branding, and said, okay, let's just do one-shot stories to find another Killing Joke equivalent story for a different Batman villain. And it opened out of the gate with Tom King, Mitch Gerads, and Clayton Cowles doing the Riddler, who is, I think, got the record for most reinventions of any comic book supervillain in the last 20 years.
I mean, everyone's done a little bit of a different thing, which is, it's funny to me, Steve, because reading this, I couldn't help but think of my favorite Riddler story and just go, is this not just the same thing? Is this not just the same take on the Riddler from 2005 of, no, he's actually Batman's intellectual superior. Let's just do that. Let's just fully commit to he is Batman's intellectual superior, and everything up to now has been him holding himself back. And that's just what this is. That one went more like Moriarty Bond villain, and this went more like psycho dark serial killer kind of thing. But it's down to the fact that it's got flashbacks to his traumatic past and shit.
Well, that's more Killing Joke than it is Riddle Me That, but still.
It is surprisingly close, is it not? Down to the fact that he's so much more confident in this than he's almost ever been portrayed outside of, I think, Tom King. It's funny because I read a little bit of Tony Daniel when he took back over the book after King left, and he does Riddler right out the gate as this creepy fucking pissing in jars Howard Hughes looking motherfucker, and it's just not it. King wrote Riddler more confident in his War of Jokes and Riddles run, but this is just, again, it's on another level, and it makes a point to talk about how like Riddler's always been seen as a joke. Riddler's always been seen as like less than. He's diet Joker, you know, yada yada yada. So it was very funny to see that like apparently what I can't even remember the name of the writer for Riddle Me That back in 2005 was just like I don't know. Oh God. 18 years too early. Fuck. Someone born the year that Riddle Me That came out is legal now. I don't know what to do with that information, but there you have it.
Yeah,
so I just thought that was funny.
I figured you were gonna bring in the Riddle Me That comparison, and you're right. There is a hint of that. What if the Riddler was actually secretly just super competent? I do think though, and not to throw any shade out at your boy in Riddle Me That, but I think this is an infinitely better story than that though.
I mean, it's a more interesting story. It's got more depth. I think Tom King's a better writer. I'm not going to argue with that.
I also think the art is just leagues above that story. Like, just
you're talking about
miles above that story.
Listen, that is not a fair comparison to 2005. We'd want to look like manga art, okay? That's just not a fair fight. You're probably right. It is a leagues above story. Here's my one argument for it, okay? This is a great take. You can't use it now. Because there's we've had the whole conversation about Killing Joke, right? Where it's like the Morrison interpretation is it ends with Batman killing the Joker. I think better interpretation is it doesn't. It just repeats the cycle, and that's the point of the story, is that the cycle is always going to repeat itself. That's an argument to be had. That's left up in the air. There's a vagueness about it. I do not know how the fuck this book ends without Batman killing the Riddler. You can't. You cannot go forward in a Batman everlasting continuity with this story, as this is just the Riddler now. Because the end of the story is he has to die. There's no other way for this story to end other than Batman murdered this guy.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the story is very, like, Morrison's read of The Killing Joke is very specifically weird Ed Morrison, because they're kind of reading into the lack of ha 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 jokes and lettering to show that Batman clearly snapped the Joker's neck. But like the actual language of that comic doesn't do a whole lot to suggest that's what happened. If you want to say that Batman killed the Joker, you can read the story from that perspective. But I don't think that that's a story where like that's the dominant way to view it. That's just kind of a fun what if experiment to understand it, versus this story where, and I reread Killing Joke to talk about this too in comparison, whereas this story I think kind of does the opposite intentionally, which is no, there is no ambiguity about this. Batman does just straight up kill the Riddler. That's the whole book. The book opens and closes exactly the same way, from the exact same point of view perspective, where the person you're looking through gets killed. Like that's the story. Batman murders the Riddler, and that's the end.
Mm-hmm. And so that's like the thing, is it is a really well told, really great one and done comic, but it puts it in a place where, okay, well, you just can't use the Riddler like this then. You've created this really strong, scary, dangerous characterization for the Riddler, and that's great. But you like flew too close to the sun. You did it too well, and so you have to end the book with Batman killing the Riddler, because then there's nothing left. Whereas Riddle Me That, you might have problems with that story. I think it's much more of like a Batman movie than it is like a prestige novel or something. It presents a take that presents a new ongoing dynamic for the characters that would function, where it is the game of constantly trying to one up each other, but there's a strength to that. And I don't think it makes this story worse that it doesn't do that. There's certainly value to just telling a story, and this kind of does hype up how scary the Riddler really could be, and this could be what he does in continuity, but he doesn't, and that's just fascinating. But I think that just as far as comics, as that ongoing story, evergreen land goes, I do think that I still prefer Riddle Me That, just for the fact that it presents an avenue for an ongoing dynamic that this doesn't.
I think there's kind of a middle ground here with the book itself, where I don't necessarily think it's. I think the stuff with in the flashback where we see the Riddler's teacher, and his own appreciation for riddles and kind of what his argument makes for riddles and the purpose of knowledge of just kind of like chilling out and just going out for get something to eat, like don't worry about this, like sometimes it's fine to have these things. And when we bring in like the little girl going to soccer practice and how that's played into at the end when like you're in the game and stuff, I think there's an argument to hear that's more so justifying that you can still do really, really good Riddler stories, and you can still push him as long as he's still doing what his main formula. Even in Riddle Me That, his formula is still, he still does riddles in that. Like, he's still the Riddler. He's not completely removed from it like he is here. What I think this is trying to show is how far can you absolutely push this before it just breaks and doesn't work anymore, which I don't think is trying to be or read as like taking this forward, because I think you can do competent Riddler, but even like Riddler and Riddle Me That isn't this competent. Like, this is like a whole other level above that. So I think you can still do, because even Tom King like does a competent Riddler who like organizes the entire war of jokes and riddles on his own. It's an incredibly intelligent, hyper-aware, master DC guy with like every time he shows up, he does this incredible showing of intelligence. And even that guy is not nearly as terrifying as this simple version of him. So I think they can both exist in peace, and this is just, you know, those stories, like the one-offs, like Strange Visitor, right, or like Superman Prime 1 million, where like jack up their powers to 1,000,000 and they could never work in any story because they're just gods and we'll never touch them ever again, just Dr. Manhattan style things to the zenith, aren't really meant to be ongoing. I think this is the Riddler's version of that. Like, I think this is like the Super Saiyan 5 Riddler. Isn't meant to continue.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure. And it's funny to me because anytime that we do this with the Riddler specifically, where we like push him and make him all like dark and gritty, I always go back to the fucking Neil Gaiman story where it's the Riddler. He's like, and the Joker kills people now. The Joker. Just think about that. Where it's just Riddler walked up to this guy and shot him in the back of the head. We don't know why. There's no clue. There's no mystery. He just shot that guy just in the back of my head. And the Joker kills people now. What's up with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the thing about this story that really works is it's not trying to present a redefinition of the Riddler that I think can kind of sit in canon, because I think the whole point of it is that it can't. Like, the whole One Bad Day thing has been very vague about whether or not it's in canon, because some writers will insist that it is, and other writers will like be kind of dancing around it. Tom King has kind of danced around it. But, like, for example, the one that came out right after this was One Bad Day Two-Face. And that story could have been canon, except the very next week an issue of Detective came out that completely contradicted it. So, like, I don't think anyone is really taking, at least as far as like the DC editorial side goes, I don't think anyone is taking these stories as canon. I think the writers are having their own ideas as far as whether or not they're intended to fit. The Bane story is an alternate future story instead of an alternate past story. So, like, there's a lot of loosey-goosey with this. But I think what makes this particular book stand out, it's by far the best One Bad Day story so far. Like, it's not even close, because so many of them just sucked ass.
Of all of these together.
Huh?
I wonder if we'll get a collection of all of these together like they did with the Year One books.
So kind of. What we're getting is each story is getting its own individual hardcover, but they're selling a box set of One Bad Day, the Riddler, and the Killing Joke with new binding, and it's going to come in a slip box so that you can buy each hardcover and put it in the slip box and basically create one matching binding box of all of them, which is really fucking cool. But
Nah, I don't like that. I'll just wait till they reissue it.
I'm
anyway,
sure as well they'll probably do like the One Bad Day like omnibus or something as well.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure that'll happen at some point. But no, anyway, what I was saying is, with this story, I think the point of it is you wanted a take on Riddler that matches what Alan Moore and Brian Ball did with Killing Joke. And so the story is okay, but there's nowhere to go from here. The whole point of the story is that if you twist Riddler up this much, where if you take the riddles are fun and make him a murderous psychopath on this level, then you just break the formula. You break Batman, you break Joker, you break Riddler. You put them to a degree where they can't possibly come back from. And I really like that about it, because it's a fun story in its own right. It's a really, really well done story, but it's also like a sly commentary about the whole thing, which is you can't actually One Bad Day or Killing Joke most Batman characters because it doesn't work.
See, I don't know if I agree with that. I feel like you could do a story of all of these characters kind of pushing their limits and taking it farther than they ever have before, to quote Gordon from The Killing Joke, without having to break the dynamic. And I think, I like this story. And it's going to be weird. This is going to be a weird review, because I genuinely do like this story. I like this book. I love the art. But I'm always a big defender of never ending a character, never ending a dynamic, and I think things are generally stronger in comics when you explore why these stories have the power to last forever, why these dynamics are so strong. And for all the shit I will give Alan Moore for a billion years, right? The strength of The Killing Joke is it was written not to be in continuity, and yet it so perfectly fits because it's just about how this dance goes on forever. And you don't necessarily have to make every story about that, but I feel there is something lost in creating a story that is specifically about Batman's very intimate and intense relationship with his rogues gallery on an individual basis, and why these characters have existed for so long, and will continue to exist for years to come, that doesn't depend on, killing them. I feel like this is almost like an MCU villain problem at this point, where you can't do the MCU villain team-up movie because all of them are dead. You can't create a situation where you've got a Batman prestige line of stories for the One Bad Day story of this is the Bane story, this is the Riddler story, if every one of them's going to end with and then they had no choice but to kill each other. And I think that might just be the kind of the poison of the take of Batman kills the Joker at the end of The Killing Joke. I don't like that interpretation going forward. I don't like that as the statement on the character of, if you take the Riddler as far as you possibly can, the Batman could never keep up. This dance could never continue. I'm like, no, that's the thing. If you take someone as far as they can and they completely outmaneuver Batman, Batman builds the bigger box around them. I don't know what... I will fully admit, I'm not as good a writer as Tom King, right? I don't know how you make the Riddler as scary in this situation as you do, and find a way for Batman to beat him that doesn't just depend on, well, I guess I just have to murder him. I mean, maybe he could cripple him to death. I don't know. Just cripple, okay, good luck giving orders or whatever. You now breathe through a tube and will never walk again. Good luck. But I don't know what you do in this situation, push the Riddler this far and have Batman still win the day or continue as they have, when that's very much the point of the story, is you can't. But it is just, I feel that does a disservice on some level to not necessarily the Riddler as a character, not necessarily Batman as a character, but to their relationship as enemies in comics.
I don't know if I disagree with you, because I feel like I'm saying something very similar, which is, yes, you're right, which is the whole point of this book, which is you can take it to an extreme that's so far that you break the dynamic and you have nowhere else to go, and you shouldn't do that. And that's the point of the story. Like, I think that's what this book is getting at, is that, like, there is a way to tell these stories where they do kind of dance around and go in the circle forever and ever. And, like, Tom King's own take on the Riddler is different than this in his mainline continuity books, because he's got War of Jokes and Riddles, but he's also got Killing Time. And in both instances, he's writing a version of the Riddler that's nowhere near this, but it still has a similar kind of competence to him that is going further than Batman has done before. Like, in War of Jokes and Riddles, he does just straight up win. He does just straight up says, "Ha, Batman, you have to kill me now," and the Joker stops him, and that's why that book is so tragic. And that works for that context and that story, and you could keep that take going forever. But I think the point of this book is that's the way you should do it. And approaching this idea of turning all of Batman's villains into Killing Joke level one bad day psychopaths is a dead end, because it only ends in something like this.
I mean, you've gotten to read this much more than I have. What is this, like your 7th time through or something, Steve?
It's like my 4th time.
Yeah, I figured. So you've had much more time to think on it. I saw the panels of maybe I'll kill Stephanie or Cassandra leaked on Twitter, and all the outrage that caused.
Oh, God. So wild.
Oh, God.
And then I read it today, and that was all I've gotten for it. So I'm only able to interpret what I interpreted from it, and no more. I haven't really had a ton of time to percolate on it. But I don't know. You might be right. That might be what Tom King's trying to say with the book. I don't know if that's a message that's worth saying. It feels like, do as I say, not as I do, kids, kind of advice at that point of, here's a really good story where we take the villain as far as we possibly can, and this is to teach you a lesson that we shouldn't do that. Meanwhile, DC counting all the money that they made from this thing. Yeah, sure, that's the lesson. Hey, can we take all the other Batman villains and push them as far as they can possibly go? Because this is making some fucking money.
I don't know. It's interesting because, like, I feel like with what you two are talking about, is like I agree with Steve that I do think that is the point of the book, but I also don't think it's mutually exclusive where an isolated work can talk about that, where it doesn't necessarily mean that the core concept always has to be a dead end. Like, I think I disagree with that particularly. Like, I think the end result of certain characters, if you make them as metaphors and stuff like that, like death is only one small outcome emotionally or kind of cathartically that you can go to with all of these things. I feel like that's this type of story of death, I think, suits Riddler and the Joker very, very well. Like, I think those are two characters in particular that I'd say outside of the entire Batman's Rogues Gallery, where once they are pushed to their jacked up version of what their current, like, modus operandi is, then yeah, you just have to kill them. Like, I think that makes complete sense, and that's why that would become, like, an interesting thing where, what I really like, just talk about the book itself for a second, what I really love about how this is structured is the idea of it being itself a box, a very tightly contained, very well-prepared, gorgeously scripted and illustrated, and all the beautiful textures. The lettering is on point with every single thing. They use the gunshot font is the same font that's used for Darkseid is in Mr. Miracle. Like, every aspect of this book is meticulous, and I think on a craft level that really helps the two characters of Batman and the Riddler being both the best defined for their intellect when they face each other. Like, that is what the Riddler and the good stories about the Riddler are bringing up. They're bringing up stories about how do we put self-worth into our intelligence? Does that define who we are as people? Is that a separate thing altogether? And is that the equivalent of, it's the closest, being smart in comics is kind of the closest you can get to the writer, which means it's the closest you can get to God or omnipotence, by just being aware of the medium we're in. Like, writers don't impact how big your muscles are or how strong you are, but they can impact how clever your plans are. So that's why someone like Lex Luthor or the Joker, all these very hyper intelligent characters are often the most scary, because they let you basically be the writer of their own story and have those grids and have that structure and have that power. All of that, I think, kind of goes to the point of, this is a very basic take of how the Riddler himself as a construct, as a metaphor in Gotham City versus Batman as a metaphor construct is pushed to the apex. That I don't think if you gave them Bane, for example, right, or if you gave them Mr. Freeze, or if you gave them Poison Ivy, would be like this at all. Obviously, it depends on the different creative teams, and I know I haven't read the other One Bad Day books. I've read this one twice, and I don't know how they've taken those other places and other characters, but I think specifically when we're talking about death in Batman and kind of the idea of the game, the chase, the back and forth, the Sherlock Holmes Moriarty, I think those two characters specifically are type of Batman. The only other one I think you can make arguments for would be people like Hugo Strange or Ra's. And even then, I think those conclusions would be different, where I think Hugo Strange's would point more to kind of like the absurdity of putting on the Batman costume to begin with. Whereas Raish, I don't think would be tied to death at all, because that's kind of how his stories always end. So I think Raish would be almost on the opposite spectrum, where the final way to defeat him would be to give him like eternal life without the Lazarus Pit. Or something like to that effect, right? I feel like these ideas of Riddler and Batman and death, how it's explored in this and how it shapes like a young child with the Riddler, is very intrinsic to specifically the Riddler as character. That's what I think that makes this book so good. But I don't think it applies to the whole Rogues Gallery and this One Bad Day concept inherently.
Which, and to be fair, none of the other books have gone in this direction like whatsoever. Like, it's kind of a shame, because you get this one really big, like, thesis statement masterpiece of a book, and then the rest are all just kind of like, could have just been an issue of Batman or something somewhere down the line. None of them really do anything.
Usually how these go is you get like a big... You get like the person that has the vision, that has the idea, and they do like the fucking banger of a book, and then everything else is meant to like try to like, you know, ride the coattails of that, and it's just no one else has the passion for it. It's just whoever got picked, whoever had the opening in their schedule to add a book in this week, kind of thing. You know, that's pretty typical for comic events like this. I feel like we get this a lot.
No, we do, but it's interesting in how the One Bad Dayness of it all kind of escalates as things go on, because the Penguin one is very literal. He literally just had a really bad day where his entire empire was stolen away, and he decides to come back and take it all back, and it sucked ass. The Two-Face one is about his dad's birthday because he hates his dad for some reason. And then the Bane one is like one of the only ones that's legitimately kind of good. It's not great, but it's kind of good. Where the One Bad Day is actually the day Bane broke Batman's back, because every day since he's been defined by it, and he's never been as good as that one moment, and he regrets it for the rest of his life. And that one's actually kind of interesting, because it's sort of like a bookend to this very thing. We're like, oh, you can go on one end of the spectrum where you take the concept too far and you break the whole dynamic, or you can go on the other end of the spectrum where you create the dynamic and you never have a way out again, which is really interesting. The Mr. Freeze one was good. It's not really in the theme of this at all, but it's good. It's a fun little Robin story.
You know the thing that it makes me think of is the Joker's Asylum book. Right?
Oh,
where,
yeah.
like, about half of the people writing it got the memo of what it was supposed to be, which is Tales from the Crypt, but it's Joker and it's Batman's villain stories. And then other people were just like, oh, so just write a Batman villain story, and then just, like, they'll do, like, narration, but they won't have it be Joker narrating, or even worse, they'll do narration, but they'll do first-person narration for the villain, and that's just that's not what the book was meant to be. Like, clearly you just didn't get the memo. Like, the editor didn't do their fucking job here. They should have seen that script and been like, no, you have to make this Joker narration. What? But I don't wanna.
Grounding it back in this book, though, just to kind of talk about this more directly, I really love the way this whole thing is done. You can tell how meticulous the script in this is, because this is probably the most precise of a page turn kind of book that I think I've ever read. Like, it's one of those things I think you just kind of can't do service to on an infinite scroll kind of digital platform, because it's so well timed from the end of every page leading into the next page or leading into the next scene. I imagine it took several drafts to get it that right. And when you eventually meet in the middle with the riddle in the past about where the answer is a fishhook and Batman says fishhook in the present, and it lines up perfectly, like that's some masterful script work right there.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't tell you. I read this online, so specifically infinitely scrolling through the pages. So I actually had. It's funny because you're right. It's done probably so well in the book, and it's not served digitally because I had to fucking zoom in to see what Batman answered the riddle with. So it just kind of broke the flow of everything.
I remember when we were doing our best of the year thing. I mentioned I didn't necessarily do this on Geeky Gentleman because I kind of wanted you to get the appreciation of just like sitting down one day.
I was not gonna have time.
I know, but like. It's just one of those things.
You can
where
have this conversation now, or you can have this conversation when Leah goes off to college. Which one do you want?
It's just one of those things, though, where like I think the kind of book that like really rewards having like that casual reading experience where you're focused on nothing but the book, and you just see how well put together every side of it is. Like there are so many instances in this where like the page turns are almost like they're talking to each other. Where you read the next panel on the next page, and then you go back and you're like, oh, okay, the reason that next page started with this word is because it finishes the thought on the last page that started here. Like it's so precise. And I know Tom King has talked about in interviews how challenging this script in particular was, and I get why, because like I can't imagine having to like map this whole thing out. You know you're not getting any ads in the 64 pages, but knowing like to the right detail what pages are on the bottom of the right hand side of the book, so you're flipping the pages over, versus what's on the bottom of one side versus looking up on the other side. Like the mapping of this is just insane.
Yeah, I was very impressed by Gerard's panels. I think how that plays with those epic reveals, mainly done through shadowy art and dialogue, is why Batman succeeded as a visual character. Like I think that's why this medium, why Batman has 60 books. Like this is why we continuously, because this character is just built for the page turn. This character is just built for the. I just think of probably my favorite panel in this whole book, which is just a full page splash, is when Batman's like he's torturing the goon.
Oh God, yes,
with the shark, and you get these really like boom, boom, boom panels repeating the same thing when we're not moving the camera, we're just kind of focusing on the guy's reaction. He's going up and down and stuff. He's going from please Batman, goes a huge long explanation, so much dialogue, slowing down the pace of the book, making you sit with them, and then once you get that turn, and you get, again, Gerard's goes so heavy with his detail that all his art looks like very realistic looking people, very realistic proportions, that every piece of furniture has texture on it. Like the definition of his art is texture. Like everything feels like it's got scratchiness to it, or you could like rub a hand over it and feel like the history of the object, or even people's faces are very, very scratchy and very defined. Like how Gordon looks in this, because there's a guy that's lived this whole time. Riddler as well, when you see the back and forth when his child self to how he is now, and how his face is kind of sunken in and is really long, and then the eye makeup, all of that, and you get this like effectively silhouette shot PNG of Batman that incredibly impressive, but it's so simple to everything. It's just all black and the eyes and the silhouette. But my God, if that just insert doesn't like prove why the character is gonna always rock, because it's just that simple. And then just the one no, Like, oh my god. You could just have sell me the book for that moment alone, right? Just like there's that good thing. And kind of selfishly, it's something I kind of miss as we've as our books have. Steve got me Batman Reptilian, so he knows how I feel about this. As we've got our writers more aware around like the social discourse of Batman and like vigilante justice and why these things aren't necessarily going to help anything, and Batman as a superhero shouldn't be defined by the Frank Miller-ness of it all. And like, yeah, I agree. Like objectively, you're right, but man. Sometimes you want to see him dangle or someone over a fucking building. Like, sometimes you just want to see that image of Batman being awful and torturing a scumbag. Like, you just want to see it. It's just cathartic.
a lot like the Riddler. This take on Batman is not like Tom King's normal take on Batman, because this is a darker story, but it's also a darker Batman, and it's a version of him that we don't like live with emotionally as much as we do in his main run, or even in like something like Killing Time, where like he's not the main character of that story, but you still get like a decent amount of understanding and sympathy for him. In this, Batman is just a straight up force of nature, and Riddler is becoming a force of nature. So Batman's dialogue in this, it doesn't read like normal Tom King Batman dialogue, because he's just so fucking dark and so fucking mean. There's that scene where he meets Riddler's dad, and I just want to read that like one little speech out real quick, because it's such a great threat and such a quintessentially Tom King set of lines, where he's like, "Despite the rumors in the press, I am not omnipotent. I have an unfortunate weakness for mercy that has too often led to careless mistakes and lingering pain. However, the moment you fired that gun at me, I lost my taste for any mercy. So you can pull that trigger. Know that the weapon is aimed at you. That you are making a careless mistake. That your mistake will lead to lingering pain." It's so good. It's so fucking good.
It's phenomenal.
See, it's funny that you say that he doesn't really write Batman the same way, because just Batman specifically, yes, but like in particular, Bruce Wayne is the most Tom King Bruce Wayne to ever Tom King, with like just all the half-finished thoughts and stuff at like the funeral, and when he talks to the wife later, all the stumbling over his words is just like I could have read that scene alone and said, "Yep, this is a Tom King scene." It's just so like to have such a brand for how you write a character is truly admirable.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a book where you can read it and be like, this is Tom King's style of writing. I just sort of more in general mean like, this is not the version of Batman he normally is.
No, for sure. His Batman is nowhere near this brutal, nowhere near this just devastating. Just, please, anything, make it stop. No.
It's so good.
It's something where I really like, because and it kind of makes me wish, as much as I love this look, and Tom King clearly loves this look that he brought into his main run, I wish he didn't. I wish they just kept the rebirth suit, because I think like for moments like this, when you go back to this kind of primal looking Batman, that's just how you would picture comic Batman in your head, with the black trunks and the gray and the black, like the year one Batman, basically, I think has such power as a tool if it was used a little bit more sparingly, for these prestige things to kind of make that distinction where, because what I think Tom King is writing in his main run, I think he is writing his version of Batman that's influenced by a whole bunch of different things, but it's the Tom King take on Batman. It's the Tom King take on Bruce. And his Batman and his Bruce don't necessarily speak that differently. I think what he's writing here is more so Batman, the primal force that kind of exists in all of our heads. Like he's writing the Batman that's not necessarily his take, but the Batman that is. And that's why the distinction between Batman and Bruce Wayne in this is much, much sharper in how Bruce Wayne's dialogue comes across. But in the same way you got him doing these epic one-liners in his epic speeches, but he's also, when he gets mad at Riddler, he gets a little less verbose and a little more just kind of general, way of talking in terms of his word choices. Like he calls someone like Riddler like stupid a lot, and that's not necessarily a word Batman tends to whip out in terms of like just calling people that like in succession and with different things. But I think it really works here because again, it's not necessarily trying to be a voice for Batman. It's kind of like every Batman that exists in our head that has fought the Riddler and all these different interpretations is now having to deal with the fact that the Riddler's not playing ball anymore, and this isn't the Riddler that's existed in everyone's different heads and all these different things. This is a new take on that. And kind of Batman's like rage and defiance at, no, you can't do that. We have to stay in this thing. You can't break this. In very much the same way when Riddler as a child is frustrated at his teacher for breaking the rules, for not following the pattern of how things are made. You're not supposed to add something in there that's different. That's not how that works. That's cheating. That's unfair. I can't get the perfect score anymore. And then the teacher be like, no, it's okay. It's fun. It's just a one-off. Don't worry about it. These things are just things. It makes you more wet. It's kind of like Tom King through that teacher kind of talking to the audience, being like, no, you can't make this character be out of character in the scene. That's cheating. You're not allowed to do that. This is different. You can't have that to your story. And then Tom King going like, LMAO, it's fine. It expands your knowledge. Don't worry about it. Batman's gonna be okay. Like I think that's I really appreciate kind of like the ability to be something that's so utterly kind of an appreciation for the comics craft and the history of the comics craft, like super indebted to Alan Moore and all of that things, and basically like a tribute to why comics are important. And in that same thing, also like having basically touched grass. Like I think that's a really funny and interesting concept that in the hands of a lesser writer wouldn't have had that in there. And I think it would have made the whole thing a lot more kind of edgy for the sake of edge mentality. And I think Tom King's a lot more self-aware of that. And kind of like, yeah, I'm just going to have the Riddle list off these insane threats and the most stereotypical, like, 13-year-old on fanfiction.net writing the Joker threats of like, I watch you sleep, Batman. Like, and Scott Snyder does that like unironically. But like, I feel like when Tom King does it, he's being completely like aware of like, yeah, this is ridiculous, but it's also cool. And I think that's a hard balance to strike.
No, for sure. While we're kind of talking about the teacher, I think that, like, in a weird way, might have been my favorite character in this. Just because the way in which Tom King wrote this teacher has a very unique voice that he captured that felt very, like it's such a hard thing to describe, but he feels like a 70s cool guy teacher, you know? You got that kind of feeling of just the, oh yeah, kids, don't worry, you know, maybe you'll catch me out by the bike rack after school smoking a little weed. It's all good. Like, it's just, that's kind of vibing guys, like the cool guy teacher, the one that kind of gets it and is like, he's the one that everyone likes in class or whatever. I thought that was such a, like, perfectly, because I feel like we all had that teacher in school, the one that like acted, that was maybe a lot younger than the other teaching staff or whatever. And just felt like they got it more. I don't know. It hit the right kind of notes for me. I was really impressed by that character because it's just it's so distinct from what I think you would expect a character to be in that role of the teacher that got Riddler as a child in trouble for, you know, not passing his test or something. You'd expect something like overly strict or, you know, yada yada yada. To make it just someone who's so fucking chill is pretty good to me. I liked that quite a bit.
Yeah, the background and just kind of continuing the tradition of Tom King taking all of his plots from old movies is the backstory is literally just Dead Poet Society.
Thought so. Yep.
To the point where if you go to the panel where he's going through the filing cabinet to find the test answers, it's got Mr. Keating's name in one of the files. So like it's just a straight up homage to Dead Poet Society. And he's talked about in interviews that part of the reason for wanting to do that is, one, Riddler's original comic book backstory is boring as shit. Nothing actually happens. He like cheats on a contest. and then decides to be the Riddler. It's very dumb. But also in the 70s and 80s, there were a lot of these kinds of movies where a good teacher walks into someone's life and saves the day. Everything from like what the fuck is the name of that really famous James Dean movie? Rebel Without a Cause. Yeah, everything from like Rebel Without a Cause up through Dead Poet Society kind of had that formula to varying degrees. And so if you were around his age in that era, you would be watching this kind of shit all the time. But the thing about Dead Poet Society that everyone forgets is that movie's actually really fucked up, because that movie is a teacher comes in to make everyone's lives better and carpe diem and all that jazz. And he doesn't count on the fact that people's home lives and their personal emotions are way more complicated than just having a good teacher in their life. And so it inadvertently causes one of the kids to kill themselves. And it's actually a very tragic story about like, yeah, Robin Williams can inspire you to a degree, but the world is also equal parts going to be designed to beat you down, and you only have so many ways out of that. And the Riddler version of this, I really like, because it maintains the thing about that movie that is actually very sad. Because now it's really cliche to just be like, Dead Poet Society is that movie where everyone calls the teacher, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," and it's all heartwarming. And it's not at all. It's actually a very, very sad movie. And I like that touch here. I like the way they're weaving this idea that the book is called Dreadful Reigns, which rearranged means riddles are fun. And the thing with him as a kid and the teacher is that he refuses to have fun and he doesn't understand riddles. So the teacher is like, no, you got to learn to have some fun. You should like figure out these riddles. So he murders him and then decides to become the Riddler so he can have fun, only to loop back around and say, I'm done having fun. This was never the way to do this. I'm just going to go back to being something a lot darker and something a lot more serious than you ever expected, that I was just kind of toying with you the whole time. All of that is really, really cool.
Apparently,
I really
after
like that.
30 years of getting beat up and he doesn't like it anymore. It hurts when you hit me.
I love
don't
that.
like that.
I love that line so much.
I like that a lot as well, because I think a lot of other people, when given this, would go in the direction of like, he's so smart now that he's also a better fighter than Batman.
Yeah.
Like you can just see that shit. Like it's Sherlock Holmes style fighting. I love that his version of smartness is just basically making a restraining order, where he's just like, please don't touch me anymore. I don't want to fight this. This is bothering me. I've got permanent damage from your Superman-built knuckle dusters. Like, please, I am a normal-ass man. So, like, I really like the idea of him finally being like, you know what? If you do this, I'm gonna do this, kind of. And that's a thing I kind of would like to actually see go, because I think that part's just like, I think the thing you can't keep is obviously like the secret identity thing and like the watching the Robins and could kill any one of them at will kind of thing. And like some of the
Well,
stuff.
to be fair, you could keep the secret identity thing. He knew Bruce's
Yeah,
a long ass time.
For sure. But that's always with these Batman villains, kind of on a ticking clock, just in general.
Yeah.
But you can. That's probably the one you can keep as well. But the specifically, I think like if you touch me, I'll kill a random person is a really good like anti-Batman threat, but one that I do think is overcomable for Batman. That I would like to see like get used in a story that's kind of just about that as like a one-off issue, because I think that's an interesting idea, specifically like that. Like, just your act of doing this, Batman, is going to have consequences, and I like what he puts in here of like, I don't even need to threaten your family because you're Batman, and every innocent person, you will feel the same amount of guilt. And I feel like that's a very specific man level understanding of like how Bruce perceives things when how I'm to be written and stuff, where like he takes every death in Gotham to heart. He remembers all of their names. So even when he's being hardcore badass Batman, you never don't emphasize with him. You never don't feel his love for his people. Like in everything Tom King does, I think he writes a Batman that's intensely in love and romantic with his mission, even if it hurts him sometimes. basically all the time. But so I think that's a really beautiful take on the character of Batman, and then using that against him as a dagger, I think is really genius. Particularly that always, when I first read that and the second read, that's the thing that like, because like we've seen like the Joker's done similar things, right? With like getting the guards to kill each other is kind of a trope we've seen with Arkham before. Getting like an inmate to kill themselves. The bank thing, like a lot of these are things we've seen with other characters played out. Like Lex Luthor has a lot of that. Any kind of Kingpin as well has similar moments of that. But very specifically, the idea of like playing with Batman's moral compass and his empathy as a deterrent. I really want to highlight that because I think that's an ingenious little bit of writing that I'd want to see explored further.
Yeah, for sure. I anytime we stretch Batman's moral code to where his only option is I just have to murder this person, I just think about the fact that Batman is one of the top 10 martial artists in the world and knows like a billion ways to kill people, but probably also some ways to just like put someone in a coma forever to keep his conscience at bay. So I always wonder about that one as like his ultimate counter plan for somebody.
As a kid, I've always had this weird question of like, okay, you didn't kill this dude, but you put him into traction for like 6 years, and I don't know if that's better. Like at what point is that basically death?
Like, for real though, just you can't kill me, Batman, because if you even so much as touch me, a random person in Gotham will die. Okay. 5-palm exploding heart technique adjusted slightly so that your body shuts down from the neck down. Sorry, you're a cripple now. You're just too dangerous. Like, fuck. I'm sorry, this shit. How are you gonna threaten someone if you have to like blow a tube to move around the room? You know, like, I'm sorry, they're just not gonna be as afraid of you anymore because now you're just so much more vulnerable than you were. Like, everyone thought the Riddler was so pathetic, but like the idea that he could just reach out and do something. But now it's like, well, shit. I'm not sure how like dangerous you really are anymore. And if not, well, how far can I take this till you aren't dangerous anymore? Like, oh, okay. I it might weigh on my conscience a little bit, but as far as like letting innocent people die, I kind of do that a lot. So maybe your gamble isn't as good as you think it is.
What if this completely disproves your point, Ian, and like the next issue of fucking Detective Comics has the Riddler just in a full body cast like that guy out of SpongeBob? And he's like, "What did you say, Riddler? Oh, I'm sorry, Batman. I won't do that again, Batman." And it's like in a fucking like Stephen Hawking voice box that's coming out. Oh damn! Okay, guess that's what he meant. He didn't actually kill him. He just like the panel went to black and he fucked him up.
I'm just saying, like, that seems like a viable option too, even if it doesn't work out.
If you want to make this canon, I think that's the end of you go. You just have Batman be like, all right, I'm gonna bend my rules because I'm not gonna kill you, but I'm gonna fuck you up more than I've ever fucked anyone else up in my life. And then the Riddler is so fucking traumatized from that. He's like, you know what? No, good idea. Good. Let's go back to the riddles, please. Back to the riddles, please.
Legitimately, though, because I feel like I am coming across things, but just talk about it. If we were to do, like, Riddler on film, and, like, people have played it with the idea of, like, the cane a lot, and that could be cool, too, but, like, literally just talk about it. The Riddler, like, as a villain in a wheelchair kind of would be kind of hype, and you could do some interesting stuff with that.
You could go for it, yeah.
Because, again, I never liked the Riddler as a villain, as like, a physical threat. It's always stupid. The only thing worse is when Scarecrow studied Crane-style martial arts.
Oh, God, yes. I love that shit, man. Crane art of Kung Fu.
That's the only thing worse. Shit. That is the only thing worse than Riddler as a physical threat.
This man said he could get no bitches, so I will use my lanky body to make an entire martial. Fantastic writing. Peak 90s comics.
Yep. So,
Oh my God.
but no, I just talking about that, thinking about it, I'm mostly joking about it, probably in a way that will get my ass canceled. I'm sure the paraplegic community is going to have words for me about how, no, they could be like, horrible supervillain threat and live your dreams, folks. But I was just sitting there talking about it, like, actually, that would be kind of fucking cool, though, if you just, film Riddler came on screen, just like, in a wheelchair, maybe. You remember that? Like, it's not a good movie, but you remember that scene in Pearl Harbor where, like, to make a point, FDR stands up at the war table. It's like, never tell me what's impossible. Like, you do that with Riddler, where he's been in a wheelchair the whole fucking movie, then he just pulls out the cane to stand up one time to like deliver the line. That'd be pretty fucking cool.
That's the one time he drops the fucking riddle me this.
Yeah, let's fucking go. Sorry, just a hype idea. Never thought of it before, but like I kind of dig that idea of Riddler in a wheelchair, but still being like a super threatening villain could be kind of cool. Maybe disproving my point here, but again, just fucking his ass up is worse than that.
Ian, you know what? This is kind of impractical. This doesn't make sense. Not really practical. Also, Ian, you know what? Actually, though, this is the fucking sickest idea I've had for the Riddler in a long time.
Listen, I'm just saying, like I challenged myself, okay? I like to do, as a writer, I like to just present a thing of like, okay, there's no way to get past this. Here's how we're going to get past this. Like, it's good writing, man. It's good writing. Anyway.
So touching base on some other just like sporadic things about this book. The backstory with Riddler's mom is really interesting too, I feel like, where he finds his mom and he goes to confront her about why where she went and why she didn't come back for him and all that, and before letting her answer he just kills her, and that's the thing that ends up breaking him. That's the thing where he decides, okay, this isn't a game anymore. I really like that. There is a much darker version of this story that takes place from Riddler's perspective, where he's having that identity crisis, because just the implications and hints of it here are kind of fucked up. But the idea that you're getting an entire character study of this guy was basically abused by his dad, went overboard and murdered a teacher, decided to just have fun and play riddles all day, and then discover that his entire life rested on this one person walking out on him, or so he thinks, and he can't even face the reality of what they might say, so he murders her and decides games are over, that all of this was basically for nothing, and he's just going to be himself for the rest of his life afterwards. That's pretty fucked up. Like, even in the beginning of the story, there's that scene early on where after he gets the riddle wrong the second time, he gets like his dad's gun and he debates shooting himself in the head as a kid. Like, this is a really fucked up take on the Riddler from beginning to end, and I feel like we only saw it from the digestible side, but there's a much darker thing hiding right behind it.
Yeah, you right. That's all I got. You right.
I also really like the framing device from the very beginning, where you're in the first person POV of the random guy, and he's talking up to his wife about his daughter and how she doesn't know of whether or not she wants to go play soccer or not. She might be sick or she might not be, and that's a very like normal human, like relatable conversation that you could hear. Like, that sounds like a thing a dad would talk about. But it's also like an interesting microcosm of this whole thing, where it's like the kid has a commitment and she has a feeling, and she's leaning back and forth and she's not sure which of the two she's actually on. And that's effectively Batman and Riddler's relationship in this whole book, where like there's the commitment, and then there's what you want in the moment, and then there's the situations where you did what you didn't want to do and you realize you wanted to do it all over, which is effectively what Riddler's whole story ends up being. I really like that. There's a lot of like cutesy little things like that in this book that I feel like just are really refined script writing, like that kind of stuff. Like, there's that, and like how the Riddler's first riddle is the answer is a schoolhouse, which is how you flash back into the school. Like, there's so much cool stuff in this script. I would love to see the full script for this.
Question, Steve. I didn't bother to Google any of these. Did Tom King make any of the riddles for this, or did he just use ones?
I don't think he made any. All of the riddles that I have at least heard somewhere. The schoolhouse one I know for a fact is a pre-existing one. The death one at the end I googled just to be sure, and I think he made that one up. The dreadful rains turns into riddles are fun. His kids actually made up. But there's probably like a mix of them. Honestly, there's probably like a few that he did and a few that there are like just old school classics.
Okay. I'm just always curious about that because it's a fun thing to do when writing the Riddler is to try to come up with original riddles. I don't like when people just, or not necessarily. I don't mind when people just pull stuff out of a book, but it feels like you're doing a disservice to the character if you only do that,
You definitely do get like a sporadic bunch here because like I think it makes sense on a certain level that the incorrectly riddle is a really obvious one that he clearly didn't make up, but that's the one on the test that his teacher gave him, versus the death one that Batman tells at the end, which is clearly one that he just came up with, or the schoolhouse one, which is a pre-existing one, but then it leads into other riddles that he gives out in Arkham, and you get to see his like quirky process for coming up with a riddle in the middle of like that big shootout in Arkham. Like I thought all of that was really, really
Yeah, no, I like the shootout thing, and then he sits there and he tries to like think of ones. No, too specific. You had to be there. That was pretty good. So I don't know. It's fun reading those. I like when we give Riddler riddles and not just make him the puzzler, and
the puzzler.
Let him do his thing.
The Clue Master.
The Clue Master. Still a great episode of the Batman. He should come back.
That's a really good episode. That's the only good thing Stephanie Brown ever.
She's not even in that episode.
Is it Clue Master that's Stephanie's dad, or is it
Sportsmaster?
Yeah. It is Clue Master, right?
It's not Sportsmaster. It's not Sportsmaster.
No, it's not Sportsmaster. Sportsmaster is Artemis's dad.
Yeah,
I forget if it's Clue Master at Stephanie's dad or if it's Calculator, but it's one of those.
I think it's Clue Master. Who the fuck was the guy in the Batman? Didn't he call himself Clue Master?
I'm pretty sure that was Clue Master too. Yeah, it was just a different take.
Okay, it's just different take. Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head because I don't give a shit about Stephanie Brown. But I was just
the
curious.
idea that Stephanie Brown is the daughter of this like 500-pound motherfucker is really funny to me now. Just in the universe of that show, because like, that's so early in Batman's career that episode happens. So like, she has to be born after that, or like has just been born at that point.
Well, the reason I said it's the best thing Stephanie ever gave us is that that show was in like the mid 2000s. And Stephanie would have been pretty new by then. So, like, clearly Clue Master would have gotten thrown into that show because he was now comics relevant and they couldn't use any other. So thank you, Stephanie, for giving us a really good episode of the Batman that you were not in.
Any topic? Of course, any topic. Current events? Yes, absolutely nothing is off the books. Fine. What is the identity of the Batman? That's
so good. That's
not fair. That's so good.
I love it so much.
Top tier Batman moment, honestly.
That series had so many of those.
I know. They fucking knew what they were doing.
Oh my god. The Batman versus Dracula one, where like he's about to burn Dracula alive, and Dracula, you're Bruce Wayne, and then he just like goes, I'm the Batman. It's so fucking good.
Oh, real good. Real good.
Okay. Are we reaching the end of our time together, gentlemen? Is there anything else we really need to talk about with this one?
Do you prefer this to Killing Joke or not?
Yes.
No. Killing Joke's still the better comic, I'm sorry.
I like it better than Killing Joke. I think this one, works better on multiple rereads than I think Killing Joke does. I think Killing Joke's a really good story, and it's a classic for a reason. But I think there's just skill and execution-wise, there's just a lot more going on in this one. Like, I think the art is more intricate. I think the way the pages are laid out are more interesting. I think the script is a lot tighter. On like just an entirely mechanical level, I think this is a better made comic that I like reading more than The Killing Joke, even if The Killing Joke is arguably a better story or a more iconic story.
I think
answer your own question.
I think I'm with you in everything. I think I like this more, but I do like Brian Boland's art more than Gerard's. That's a tough. Boland's style, I think, is a little bit more to my tastes.
I really do like Boland's art. I go back and forth though, because
especially the original coloring. Oh.
Yeah, the original colors is what makes it, and get that anywhere.
Yeah, but those original colors with the oval Batman and that version of the Joker is just that's burned into my brain for the rest of my life. So
no, that's fair.
But in terms of everything else, I do think this takes the cake. Other question I'll ask, just because I think we're not necessarily. I'd be surprised if we ever talk about the rest of this line on this thing. So I think it's just a fun question to ask here. If you had to if you wanted like a DC thing, and they said we were going to make one or more of these, it's going to be about any DC hero and any DC villain, but it has to still fit the like one bad day, push to the limits premise, like this in Killing Joke. Which pair would you pick?
Wonder Woman and Cheetah.
Damn, Cheetah one bad day would be crazy.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah. And it's mostly just based on what Rucka and Liam Sharp did with her in the early Rebirth stuff, because she's just so fucking brutal in that, but she's literally just a goddamn animal, and it's terrifying. She fucks Veronica Cale up. That woman just needs plastic surgery and shit after what Cheetah did to her. That's just the idea of Wonder Woman, who's grace and compassion and everything, having to deal with like a human being that has just been turned into a literal beast. Beauty and the Beast, but in reverse, is inherently interesting. A lot of stuff does their origins. I'd like to, of course, just continue. No, this is the dynamic. We used to be friends, and now we're not. And now we're just at each other's throats. And is there anything I can do? I'm the princess of the Amazons. I'm meant to create bridges in the world, not to make enemies. I don't want to be your enemy forever. I know there's a path where we get to be friends again one day. And it's just, no. Fuck you. Kind of mentality, because all the humanity has been stripped away, and now it is just a beast that can speak. Is just really fascinating to me.
Yeah, that's hype.
So yeah, that's my Wonder Woman Cheetah one bad day pitch for you. DC, call me. I might have time to fit you into my busy schedule.
What about you, Steve?
Probably Green Arrow and Count Vertigo. I think that would be a really interesting one. Count Vertigo in like the main Green Arrow books has never been a particularly like interesting guy, but in the Suicide Squad book, he's lost his kingdom and everything, and he basically has like a running pact with Deadshot, where he's like, hey, at the end of this, I want to kill myself, but I'm too much of a coward to do it, so can you just shoot me in the head? And Deadshot's like, okay, sure, bet, I'll do it. And so they go through a couple of adventures together, and the last page of the last issue of the Ostrander Suicide Squad is Deadshot getting ready to shoot Count Vertigo in the head. And like it's just silent panels, and Deadshot's like, are you sure you still want to do this? And then Count Vertigo like thinks about it for a little while, and he's like, maybe not. And then the book's over. And like that's the end of that series. And so you take that and then you implant that into modern Green Arrow, like well, I say modern, but this was like 15 years ago. But like you implant it into like post-crisis, pre-New 52 era Green, where he's just come back from the dead, and you've got like this budgeting Green Arrow family, and he's getting ready to marry Black Canary, and he's kind of set himself up in a certain kind of lifestyle where he's got people that depend on him, and he is this ultimate kind of hippie left-wing character up against a monarch who's basically just the epitome of everything that Green Arrow hates. And you do a story where you've got Green Arrow who has everything to live for, and Count Vertigo who can't really seem to find a reason to keep living. And you play out like their political differences in that fight would be really, really cool, especially because Count Vertigo's power to make it so that Green Arrow can't shoot straight because he's dizzy could kind of play into the same thing where he's worming his way into his brain and making him lose his balance the same way Vertigo himself kind of has, and just as Oliver feels like he's finally found his own footing, like all of that, I think you could play up into a really cool symbolism heavy story. Also, they both have really easy to do like modern costumes where you wouldn't have to like go out of your way to make it like a big explosive superhero book. You could make it like just a really bare bones street level story where it's just these two guys talking and then occasionally fight.
I'd be down for it, and I think that would be one where like that character like desperately would need something like that. It's very hard to like pick up.
Vertigo.
I mean, without Count Vertigo, but also I think like Green Arrow would really benefit from things, and also I feel like you could have a lot of fun with the marketing for that of just Green Arrow just always steals Batman's shit. So like the fact that they just steal the premise of the One Bad Day Killing Joke format, I think it'd be really funny with Green Arrow. They even have a line in the book where he's kind of just like, I thought Bruce had to deal with this shit. I don't want to deal with these fucking this.
Oh my god, that'd be
philosophical. Too philosophical.
I just like the fact that Steve's like, oh yeah, I'd back Green Arrow's like continuity up about 15 years.
Hey man, we're out of canon. I can do whatever the fuck I want.
That's true. Alfie, how about you?
Sorry, Steve, do you want something else you want to say?
No, go ahead.
Okay, my thing is either I'd want to do Superman Darkseid just with the stipulation that they can't fight, like, physically in it, and just have it be a story about, almost kind of like Book of Job, or any kind of thing of, like, Jesus in the desert, or that type of story of, like, there'd be a third, like, normal person character, and it would be about Darkseid trying to break them, and Superman kind of unwillingly, like, it's just like a regular person in Metropolis, and like, can Superman's like inspiration thing, and like, what would win out? Like, just good versus evil, and talk about that in a story for those two diametrically opposed characters, like Superman can versus Darkseid is. Just have a book that's just about nothing but that, of like a pure distilled take. That isn't just Darkseid trying to take over the world. It's just Darkseid got bored one day and decided he wanted to corrupt the soul of one of Superman's friends, and then can Superman like stop that? Like, you know, can and how does he do that? And you can get hokey with that, but I think if you got the right writer on that could be like a really powerful story about like nihilism and optimism and kind of. Is it worth keep going in the world, and when it's not, is that still okay, kind of thing. Like, I think you do a lot of good with that, and it would benefit Darkseid a lot to have like a high prestige thing that was focused on just that aspect of his character, outside of like the huge big powerful dude, just the master manipulator side of Darkseid, and like just the enjoyment he gets from bringing someone down to understanding that Darkseid is, and the implications of that as just like the book would be really fucking cool. And then the other one would be Superman Zod, and it's set on the anniversary of Krypton's death, and just go from there. That would be looser, because I would have to get into like my ideas for like what Zod should be like. But I think like just if you go specifically with like the day itself being bad, I feel like the day Krypton blew up is pretty fitting to bad day in the DC universe. Like, I think that's probably the most famous bad day in DC. So I think you could do something really cool with that. But the Darkseid one, I think I have a more solid idea about.
Nice. All right, let's go ahead and do quick ratings. Quick. So I'm going to go first and give this 4 out of 5 hats. Riddler green hats. I don't know where he gets those. I imagine they're either really, really cheap or really, really expensive because they're custom made.
I'll give this 5 out of 5 John Hamm as Batman.
I'll give this 5 out of 5 sick ass Batmobile designs.
Alrighty.
Batmobile looks super cool in this book.
Bro, wait, real quick. The scene where you see the Batmobile and he's just driving around and you get that narration about a film freak's funeral and how he wants his body cut up and turned into a second film, and then they're just like, so anyway, we're just gonna burn the body. It's so funny.
That's really good.
That was something else. That felt like a shit post. Like someone dared Tom King to put that in a book. He's like, fuck it, I bet I'll do it.
Man, that's how fucking Human Target came into existence. I'd believe it.
Yeah. All right. Whose turn is it? Steve, you picked this. Alfie, you picked our last thing. So it's me. Then I'm gonna choose a review because I want to revisit a Mel Brooks movie that I haven't seen in a while. I want to review To Be or Not to Be. So we're gonna do that. I was thinking maybe I should save that for History Month. Then I was like, fuck it, I won't remember by that point. So yeah, we're gonna do To Be or Not to Be, one of the less well-known Mel Brooks movies. All right. Until next time, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I'm the Philosopher.
I am the champion of the oppressed.
And I like Tom King comics.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.